G'day guys. This video is due to somebody actually asking me the question about Africa and how in the past it was about 2% with the 1918 pandemic, and some of the death rates in some parts of Africa today are 4%. And why is this anomaly sort of things? Is there some sort of COVID vitamin D paradox in the African continent, or is it something else, or what's the actual reason for this difference? Wasn't the 1918 pandemic far worse? And if the vitamin D is supposed to provide protection, why is Africa having higher percentages compared to the past, when supposedly in the 1918 was much worse? So, which is a legitimate question. You know, why is there a paradox? Is there some other factor at play or whatever? Just go to the question. Just share the screen. So basically, this is in the past EuroLive, sort of the recent Eurasian live stream on the 7th of Feb, and Gardenia in Bloom, she actually asked me this in regards to that. I said it's a great question. Of course, for a video tonight or tomorrow, I just didn't have time, you know, and I forgot about it, and I just remembered because I got caught up, you know me, if I get caught up in something, I get caught up in something. And she actually says, she replied, it seems in Africa was hit by more deadly second wave, South Africa, and then Rhodesia, Kenya suffered with 4% death toll, but even the Congo and West Africa were affected. So there's a couple of areas. It is true that North Africa experienced lower numbers because they had been exposed to the milder first wave. I'm surprised by the sub-Saharan numbers. So look forward to what you dig up. So basically that was it. And then I actually went to the World Health Organization, and while the figures up in this part in North Africa, the cases and deaths and all that, indicative that there's sort of Central Africa there, the Congo, so to speak. There's Zambia, there's Southern Africa in particular, which is very high, South Africa, and these sort of areas, certain parts of Africa, some western parts of Africa, and some central parts of Africa. So why is this? You know, why is this effect? You can see actually, if we come across, you can see how South Africa falls within this lower band. So when you're looking at Australia, that's Victoria, that's you know, you come across now large parts of South Africa in particular are areas which tend to have much lower levels of vitamin D, you know. So that's the reason. But you know, most people say, well, you know, the Africans are out in the sun continuously compared to Europeans and other people around the world. You know, that's absurd. You know, they basically, you know, still quite rural. But that's how we understand Africa, or how we remember Africa, or through books and all sorts of literature and all that sort of stuff. Africa's changed quite a bit. Let me put it that way. You know, Africa's not the same that it was. There's been a lot of competition between China and parts of the Western world in investing into Africa. Even the Arab world is in there competing for investment and influence. And some of these economies have been undergoing double-digit growth. And I think the real paradox is that these people traditionally have not supplemented. They didn't need to. They were out in the sun, as Gardenia and Bloom sort of pointed out, that these people primarily out in the sun and all that. But we have to look at what has happened in the last couple of decades, and that's important. So I pulled this study. This is urbanization and migration in Africa. This is the Center for Migration Studies, University of Ghana. And I actually went through this. When we look at parts of Africa, the sort of migration movements and all that, really interesting. Where are they going? Now let's take a look at some other details. Okay, urbanization. This is where the crux. So when we're looking at Southern Africa, as you can see, look at the level of urbanization. This is 5 years ago. Look at the level of urbanization. Look at Northern Africa, over 50%. The general thing, even Middle Africa, when we talk about the Congo, 44%. In the 1950s, it was 14%. If you go further back, it was even less. 44%. It's projected to get to 61% by the middle of the century. So these are some of the reasons we've seen rapid urbanization, specifically north, south, west. Remember, Congo, Central, West Africa, and the southern part in particular. West Africa, above the average. North Africa, Southern Africa, and Middle Africa, above the average. So you can actually see quite clearly there that the driver is urbanization. And these are populations, like we know, like the Somalis who end up in parts of Europe and other parts. They traditionally don't supplement vitamin D. And so they have horrendous death rates in Sweden. Why? Again, low vitamin D status. So there is no paradox. The reality is that these populations have rapidly urbanized, and somebody who has got a very dark skin, like many of the Africans, you require 6 times the time out in the sun. So somebody like us can be out for 30 minutes to an hour and get sufficient good levels of vitamin D. They need 6 hours. If you're highly urbanized, you're stuffed. That's why the dramatic increase. It's because of the high urbanization in those regions in particular. But even the other regions are pretty high. The average is about 40%. That's a pretty good level. It's not too far from getting to 50%. I suspect it's over 50% now in this period. In most of these, I suspect Middle Africa is, well over 50%, and I suspect North Africa, Southern Africa, much higher than this, and even West Africa is definitely over 50%. So this is a 5-year old study, but looking at the projections, they're definitely getting into half the population of most of these large parts of these countries, and have basically, and a lot of these countries that are being rapidly urbanized as well because of the internal migration. People are going to them because there's more urbanization, more wealth, more job opportunities. That's where the bigger population numbers are. that is why we're seeing this dramatic effect. It's due to basically urbanisation. Urbanisation and the unlucky, now in the modern era that the, Africans basically, due to darker skin, require more time out in the sun. When they were basically they're tribal or, living in rural areas, that wasn't an issue. But now that they're highly urbanised, they're far more vulnerable to vitamin D deficiencies. And that is why those numbers are rising. They are in particularly more vulnerable than even us, because, I would suspect if we looked at these populations who have not traditionally supplemented, so it's not in their it's not part of their tradition to do that. They've moved in an urban environment, but they haven't changed, it will take a number of decades before they switch on that they actually require far more supplementation if they're going to live in an urban environment, that their skin tone is so incompatible to an urban environment compared to somebody with a lighter skin tone. That's just a reality, and they need to basically, these societies need to address this vitamin D issue. That's what it is. There is no paradox, African paradox. All it is basically high urbanisation, which means that large parts of the population have, as a consequence, low vitamin D status. That's the problem. Always has been. Vitamin D is so important for the immune system. All the different parts of the immune system are coated with vitamin D receptors. It's not accidental. This is the reason why autoimmunity has been rising, and a lot of other things, gut permeability, and a lot of things have been rising because of low vitamin D levels. It needs to be looked at, and it's a neglected area of health, unfortunately, because people still, to this day, doctors do not understand vitamin D. They still say, oh, you just need this mineral for, calcium metabolism. Most doctors only understand when it comes to vitamin D in terms of calcium metabolism. They're completely in the dark. So behind, decades behind the current research, which is quite unfortunate, because a lot of people are, a lot of these countries, they do get their medical advice from the United States and European countries and tend to apply that as the standard of care. And since we don't focus on vitamin D, they don't, unfortunately, to their detriment. So that is the real driver. There is no paradox. So hope you enjoyed this little thing. And if you've got people of African descent who are friends and all that, get the information out. Share this on their social media platform. Let them know so they can let their family and friends back home be aware of it as well. Because they need to know, and they need to take some steps if they're going to protect themselves in the long run, not only from the current virus that's going around. There will be other respiratory ones, and they could potentially be even more lethal than the current one. And I would hope that I could contribute to helping save lives in a place where the knowledge about the importance of vitamin D is much, much less because of historical reasons. That's all it is. I mean, Europeans have lived in colder climates and out of necessity prioritized vitamin D but if you're living in a hot climate where you just have to walk out and stay out for a couple of hours and get it, it's a non-issue. But if your lifestyle changes and you become urbanized, then it becomes an issue. So if you've got people who are darker skinned, living in an urban environment, get the message out, help those people protect themselves against this one and future risks. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. See yous.